Look, I have to be honest with you before we even start. I've been staring at my screen for the last hour trying to figure out how to open this one, because what has unfolded in the last 72 hours around Kendrick Lamar is not a rumor. It is not a leak, it is not another one of those industry whispers that fizzles out by the weekend. This is the moment the entire rap game has been dreading for over a year, and every single person who's spent the last 12 months talking sideways about Kendrick Lamar is about to find out what happens when the quiet one finally decides to speak. Every single one of them. And if you have been paying even a little attention, you already know the storm is not coming, the storm is already here. The clouds have already rolled in over the entire industry, and the first crack of thunder just hit with a weight nobody was ready for. Kendrick Lamar did not need to say a word. He just needed the rest of them to keep talking. And boy, did they talk themselves right into the grave. Before we go any further, do me one favor. If you believe Kendrick Lamar is about to drop the album that ends this whole era, if you think he is about to embarrass every single one of these grown men wearing rapper costumes for Halloween year-round, if you are ready to watch the last card in the deck flip over on live television, hit that like button, hit subscribe, and hype this video up so it reaches everyone in the culture who needs to see it. Because what I am about to lay out is not clickbait, it is not speculation, it is a full autopsy of the greatest strategic checkmate in the history of hip-hop, and Kendrick Lamar is the grandmaster nobody caught in time. Here is where the whole thing gets wild. Kendrick Lamar has spent the entirety of this year in what looked, from the outside, like total silence. No interviews. No promo runs. No Twitter fingers. Nothing. And in that same window of silence, the rest of the industry has done everything humanly possible to keep his name at the center of every single conversation. Drake dropped 3 albums back-to-back, 3, and the only songs anybody remembers from any of them are the ones where he is trying to flip a Kendrick Lamar bar from 2 years ago. J. Cole ran a tour that was supposed to reset his brand, and the culture blinked and moved on. Kanye put on stadium shows so massive they should have shifted the zeitgeist for a month, and instead they got maybe 48 hours of momentum before the timeline pivoted right back to a rapper who has not released a single note of new music. That is not an accident. That is design. That is Kendrick Lamar sitting in the eye of a hurricane he built with his own 2 hands, watching everyone else drown while he sips something cold on the porch. And the timing on this is what nobody is talking about. As of this week, industry insiders are confirming what a handful of us have been saying since the spring. The album is coming, the release window is locked, and it is arriving with a collaborator so personal, so tied to Kendrick Lamar's entire arc as an artist, that the moment the announcement drops officially, the conversation is going to break the internet in half. Kendrick Lamar and DJ Dahi. Together again. On a record that people close to the studio are calling one of the most emotionally naked pieces of music Kendrick has ever recorded. And it is not a diss. Let me repeat that because there is a whole coordinated smear campaign trying to spin this in the opposite direction. It is not a diss album. It is something so much more surgical than that, and by the time you finish this video you are going to understand exactly why the diss album narrative is being pushed by the exact people who are terrified of what is actually coming. Circling back to the game for a second, because this is the piece of the puzzle that finally locked everything into place. The game has been on a public meltdown for the better part of the last month, and if you go back and trace the timeline, it started right around the moment industry insiders began whispering that Kendrick Lamar had finalized his tracklist. The game, a man who once claimed the West Coast as his second home, has spent the last 4 weeks throwing shots at Kendrick Lamar, defending Drake in the strangest possible ways, and posting the kind of rants online that make you wonder if his phone has been hijacked. And the receipt everybody forgot? June 16, 2016. That is the date the game brought Drake into Compton to film the 100 music video. Kendrick Lamar's Compton. The most sacred ground in modern West Coast rap. And on that day, according to people who were there, something shifted permanently in the ecosystem. It was not just a music video shoot. It was a symbolic act, a rapper from the West opening the gate for the rapper Kendrick would eventually have to burn to the ground. Kendrick Lamar remembered. Kendrick Lamar has been remembering for 9 straight years. And now, with the game unraveling on his own timeline, we are watching a domino that was placed on the board almost a full decade ago finally tip over. That is who Kendrick Lamar is. That is the level of long-view strategy he operates on. While the rest of the industry is worried about their next release week numbers, Kendrick Lamar is playing a game that spans decades. And every single person who tried to run at him in the last 3 years, from Lil Baby to Young Thug, from 21 Savage to The Game, is now a case study in what happens when you underestimate the quiet man in the room. Let me get into the part that is going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people. Kendrick Lamar, without releasing a single new song this calendar year, without a promo run, without a magazine cover, without a viral moment, has become the most powerful rapper of all time. And I am not saying that as a fan. I am saying that as somebody who has watched the metrics, the discourse, the streaming patterns, and the cultural weight of every single mainstream release this year. Drake dropped 3 albums. Kendrick Lamar dropped nothing. And the conversation is still about Kendrick Lamar. That has never happened in the history of the genre. Not with Jay-Z. Not with Nas. Not with Eminem in his prime. Not with Kanye. Nobody has ever dominated a calendar year of hip-hop discourse without releasing a single note of music. Kendrick Lamar is doing it right now, in real time, and every single person still trying to argue against him is unknowingly feeding the exact machine that is going to bury them. And here is the piece of it that even the biggest Kendrick Lamar supporters are missing. This was always the plan. From the moment he stepped away in early January, this was the play. Kendrick Lamar knew that in a genre that has forgotten how to create defining moments, the artist who becomes the moment wins. He is not competing with albums anymore. He is competing with an entire cultural gravity, and he has already won. The industry has organized itself around him without his permission and without his participation. Look at the numbers, but not the streaming numbers, because those can be inflated with radio campaigns and playlist deals and every other trick the majors have in the drawer. Look at the discourse numbers. Look at where the conversation is happening. Every rap podcast, every single one, is talking about Kendrick Lamar in every episode. Not Drake. Not Cole. Not Kanye. Kendrick Lamar. Every hip-hop journalist is either writing about him or writing about someone who is talking about him. Every barbershop conversation about the state of the genre ends with somebody saying Kendrick Lamar's name. And every rival artist who tries to change the subject only accelerates the phenomenon, because the second they mention him, the algorithm feeds another wave of Kendrick Lamar content into 100 million timelines. He is not a rapper anymore. He is a self-sustaining cultural weather system. And now, into that weather system, he is about to drop new music. Take a breath, because the details we have on this project are staggering. The lead single is called How to Pray. It is produced by DJ Dahi. It is dropping at the end of this month. It is the first taste of an album that industry insiders are saying is loosely themed around boxing, an entire body of work built around the metaphor of a fighter who has taken every hit, absorbed every blow, and is now stepping back into the ring for the final round. And when I heard that concept, my brain went exactly where yours is probably going right now. Creed, Rocky, Michael B. Jordan, Ryan Coogler. The entire cinematic universe Kendrick Lamar helped soundtrack when he built the Black Panther record from the ground up. That is not a coincidence. That is a signature. Kendrick Lamar has spent his entire career leaving breadcrumbs. On Squabble Up, a track that came out over a year ago, he said the line, "I got hits, I got bucks, I got new paper cuts." 2 years later, we found out that Imani, the new artist signed to PG Lang alongside Kendrick and Baby Keem, has a debut album called Paper Cut. 2 years ahead of schedule. That is the kind of storyteller Kendrick Lamar is. That is the kind of long arc chess he plays. So when he goes on Good Flirts with Baby Keem and drops a line about watching Sinners at the house, and Sinners happens to be the Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan film that just won an Oscar, you do not treat that as a throwaway lyric. You treat it as a coordinate. You treat it as a marker on a map that Kendrick Lamar has been drawing for years. And you follow the map, because the map always leads somewhere. Here is where I want to slow down and give you the theory that I think is going to define the next 12 months of hip-hop discourse. The boxing album is not just a boxing album. It is a Creed album. It is Kendrick Lamar stepping into the emotional inheritance of a fighter who was raised in the shadow of a legend, who had to prove himself in a world that expected him to fail, who kept getting up every time he got knocked down. That is not Mike Tyson. That is not Terrence Crawford. That is Adonis Creed. That is a character built by the exact same creative team Kendrick Lamar has publicly aligned himself with for over a decade. And if you overlay Kendrick Lamar's actual biography onto that character arc, the fit is uncanny. Compton kid. Overshadowed by ghosts. Told he could never carry the crown. Now stepping into the ring for the final defining fight of his career. This album is not going to be a rap album. It is going to be a film disguised as an album. And the culture is not ready. And here is the part that is going to send certain corners of the internet into orbit. Kendrick Lamar has been smiling through all of this. Have you noticed? On Good Flirts, he sounds happy. On the How to Pray snippet that leaked earlier this month, he sounds at peace. This is not a man in crisis. This is not a man scrambling to respond to Drake's 3 albums the way certain drive-through oracles of Queens keep insisting he is. This is a man who has already won and is enjoying the view from the top of the mountain while the rest of the game is still arguing about who gets to hold the crown he already dropped in their laps. Speaking of that particular corner of the media, you know exactly who I am talking about. Let us address the coordinated smear campaign that has been ramping up in the last 2 weeks. There is a very specific narrative being pushed right now that the new Kendrick Lamar album is going to be a diss record. A pure, straight-line diss album aimed at Drake. And every time I hear one of these industry mouthpieces repeat that line, I have to laugh, because it is such an obvious tell. They are not telling us what the album is. They are telling us what they wish the album was. Because a diss album from Kendrick Lamar in 2026 would be beneath him. It would be a repeat of a battle he already won by a knockout 2 years ago. And Kendrick Lamar does not repeat himself. Kendrick Lamar evolves. That is the entire point of his career. The people pushing the diss album narrative are the same people who spent the last year telling us Drake won the beef. The same people who told us Not Like Us would fade from the culture in weeks. The same people who told us Kendrick Lamar was scared. Every single prediction they have made in the last 24 months has been wrong. Every single one. And now they want us to trust them on this? Please. Listen, if you cannot beat the man in the ring, you invent a version of him that is easier to fight in the press. That is the entire play. And I hate to say it, but it is not going to work this time. It is not going to work because Kendrick Lamar has already outmaneuvered every angle they can come from. Circling back to something crucial, because this is the moment where the whole picture snaps into focus. Kendrick Lamar has effectively cleared the entire lane. Every rapper who came up in the late 2010s and early 2020s who tried to position themselves against him is now, at this exact moment, in career decline. Lil Baby cannot get a first-week number he used to get in his sleep. Young Thug is trying to reset his entire artistic identity from scratch. 21 Savage is doing more brand deals than music. The game is spiraling publicly on a weekly basis. Drake has released 3 albums in a row and each one has sold slightly less than the last while generating slightly more discourse about a rapper he wishes would just go away. That is not a coincidence. That is a graveyard. And Kendrick Lamar has been quietly digging it for years without anybody noticing. And here is the thing about this graveyard, it is not personal. That is the part these guys cannot process. Kendrick Lamar does not hate any of these rappers. He is not sitting up at night plotting their downfall. He is just doing the work. He is just being an artist at the absolute highest level, and the byproduct of being that great is that everyone who compares themselves to you starts to look smaller by the day. That is the horror of what he has built. He did not have to attack anybody. He just had to be excellent, consistently, for over a decade, and the entire industry rearranged itself around his gravity. Now, the question that is going to define the rest of this year is a simple one. What happens when the album actually drops? Because right now, Kendrick Lamar is a myth. He is a rumor. He is a shadow on the wall of the industry. Everybody is arguing about a person who has not spoken. Everybody is projecting their fantasies onto a silence that has lasted so long it has become deafening. And the moment that silence breaks, the moment How to Pray hits the streaming services at the end of this month and the album lands on August 28th, the projections stop and reality begins. And reality is a very cold place for the people who have been living in the fantasy that Kendrick Lamar can be beaten. I want to talk about How to Pray for a second, because the snippet we have all heard tells us more than most people realize. The instrumental is smoother than what we have gotten from Kendrick Lamar in the last 2 years. It sits closer to the tonal register of Luther than it does to Like That. It is patient. It is textured. It sounds like a man who has nothing left to prove sitting down at the piano and playing exactly the song he wants to play. And that is the tell. Kendrick Lamar is not making music for the critics right now. He is not making music for the charts. He is making music for his own legacy, and when an artist of his caliber makes music for legacy, the culture always catches up eventually, because the culture always recognizes when it is being handed something permanent. And this is where I want to put a theory on the table that I think is going to age extremely well over the next 6 months. I believe Kendrick Lamar is about to release the single most powerful artistic statement in the history of the hip-hop genre from any individual artist. Not the best album. Not the highest-selling album. The most powerful. The one that reshapes how people think about what a rapper can be, what a rap album can be, and what it means to be at the top of the mountain in this culture. I know that is a heavy claim. I know it sounds like fan service. But I have watched this man's career arc for over a decade, and every single move he has made in the last 3 years has been building toward exactly this moment. The Super Bowl performance. The pop-out concert. The Not Like Us cultural takeover. The GNX victory lap. The strategic year of silence. Every one of those beats is a chapter in a story, and the album coming this month is the final chapter. And listen, if you are still one of the holdouts, one of the people scrolling through the comments right now typing, he peaked with Not Like Us, or he is scared to drop, or any of the other tired lines that get recycled every 3 weeks. I am not here to convince you. I am here to tell you that the receipts are about to arrive, and when they do, you are going to have to make a choice. You can either accept what has been true the whole time, or you can keep pretending, and every day you keep pretending, the pretending gets a little more embarrassing. The choice is yours. But the writing is already on the wall, and the ink has been drying for a long time. Now I want to spend a moment on the villains of this era, because you cannot tell this story without addressing them. The list of people who tried to end Kendrick Lamar's cultural reign in the last 36 months is long, and every single name on it is, right now, in some form of career or reputational freefall. Drake, the biggest name on the list, is running out of clean angles. His 3-album rollout was supposed to reset the narrative, and it just gave the internet 3 months of content about how his most discussed moments were still the ones referencing Kendrick Lamar. The Game, once a legend of the West Coast, is now the guy who let Drake into Compton and is watching that decision haunt him a decade later. Academics, our friend, the drive-through Oracle of Queens, has spent every single episode of the last calendar year trying to steer the narrative away from Kendrick Lamar and toward Drake. And the result is that his audience now perceives him as a mouthpiece rather than a journalist. That is not an accident. That is what happens when you tie your entire brand to a losing bet. And then there is the second tier of villains, the failed rapper class, the ones who tried to hitch a ride on Drake's coattails in the hope that if Drake could take Kendrick down, they would inherit some scraps of the throne. Every single one of them is now dealing with the consequences of that gamble. The industry has moved on from them. The culture has moved on from them. And when Kendrick Lamar drops this album at the end of the month, they're going to be forced to sit in their homes and watch the exact person they publicly bet against turn into the biggest cultural figure of the year for the 3rd year in a row. Here's the thing about hip-hop that a lot of people do not understand. This is not a genre. This is not a business. This is a war of narratives, and the artist who controls the narrative controls the culture. Kendrick Lamar figured that out probably around the time he made Good Kid and 80 City, and every album since then has been a masterclass in narrative control. To Pimp a Butterfly told us who he was politically. Damn told us who he was spiritually. Mr. Morale told us who he was privately. GNX told us who he was competitively. And this next album is going to tell us who he is historically, where he sits in the pantheon of the artists who define the culture forever. That is the pitch. That is the stakes. That is what the boxing album is really about. It is Kendrick Lamar climbing into the ring one last time to define his own legacy on his own terms, and there is not a single artist in the game right now who can meet him in that arena. I want to circle back one more time to the smear campaign, because I think a lot of people are underestimating how coordinated this is. In the last 3 weeks alone, we have seen at least 4 major hip-hop podcasts push the same 3 talking points. Kendrick Lamar is scared. Kendrick Lamar is scrambling. Kendrick Lamar is out of ideas. Those talking points did not appear organically. Those talking points were manufactured, and they were manufactured because the people benefiting from Drake's continued relevance are terrified of what happens when Kendrick Lamar takes the mic again. Because when Kendrick Lamar takes the mic again, the whole conversation resets. Every take that has been building for months collapses. Every podcast host who bet against him has to eat their words. Every rival artist who used the last year to reposition themselves against him gets exposed. And the entire ecosystem that has been feeding on the Kendrick Lamar is declining narrative loses its food source overnight. That is what this is. This is not a music campaign. This is a survival campaign. The people talking sideways about Kendrick Lamar right now are not just fans arguing on the internet. They are professionals whose livelihoods depend on Kendrick Lamar being smaller than he actually is. And when the album drops, those livelihoods start to look very shaky. That is the real reason the diss album narrative is being pushed so hard. Because if you can convince the world that the album is a diss, you can control how it gets received. You can pre-shape the discourse before the music even lands. You can make the album about Drake instead of about Kendrick Lamar. And you can steal, one more time, the moment that should belong entirely to the artist who earned it. But here is the thing. It is not going to work. It is not going to work because Kendrick Lamar has spent the last year building an audience that is smarter than the ones being lied to. It is not going to work because the snippet of How to Pray already tells us this is not a diss project. It is not going to work because Kendrick Lamar has never been the kind of artist who lets somebody else define his art before he releases it. And it is not going to work because the culture, the real culture, the one that actually listens to the music instead of the pundits, has already made up its mind about who the most important rapper of this era is. Let me tell you what I think is actually going to happen. At the end of this month, How to Pray is going to drop, and it is going to be smoother, more introspective, and more emotionally mature than anything Kendrick Lamar has released in years. The critics are going to spend a week trying to figure out how to describe it. The Drake side of the internet is going to spend a week trying to spin it. And then, on August 28th, the album is going to arrive, and it is going to be a fully formed cinematic experience, a Creed-style boxing narrative told through the medium of rap, with production that pushes the genre forward, features that expand the PG Lang universe, and a lyrical performance from Kendrick Lamar that finally, definitively, settles the question of where he sits in the pantheon. And after that, the year is over. Everybody else can go home. There will not be a bigger rap moment in 2026 than this album, because there cannot be. Every other artist has already used up their chips. Drake is not dropping again this year. Cole is not dropping again this year. Kanye is not dropping again this year. Kendrick Lamar has the entire back half of the calendar all to himself, and he is going to use every single week of it to embed this album into the culture so deeply that removing it will become impossible. Now listen carefully, because this is the part that most people are not ready to hear. The album is not the end. The album is the beginning. Kendrick Lamar is at the age where most rappers start to slow down. He is at the age where legacies get sealed. And instead of sealing his legacy quietly, he is choosing to open a new chapter. The boxing album is chapter 1 of that new era. And if my read on this is even half right, we are about to enter the most creatively fertile period of Kendrick Lamar's entire career. A period where he has nothing left to prove and everything left to say. A period where every single move he makes will be a cultural event because he has already established himself as the artist the culture cannot look away from. That is not a rapper. That is a titan. And every rap fan alive right now is watching a titan being born in real time. And this is the part that I want every single person watching this video to sit with because it matters. You are living through a moment in hip-hop history that people are going to write books about in 20 years. The Kendrick Lamar era, the one that started with Section .80, survived the Control verse, weathered To Pimp a Butterfly, peaked with Not Like Us, and is about to enter a new dimension entirely with this next album, is not just a career. It is the defining rap career of the 21st century so far. And the people who spent the last year trying to shrink it are going to spend the next decade trying to explain why they missed the moment while it was happening right in front of their faces. So here is where I land on all of this. Kendrick Lamar has already won. The album is the coronation. The victory happened months ago, quietly, while everybody else was fighting over scraps. And when the coronation lands at the end of this month, the whole world is going to see what the smart money has known all year. The king is not coming back. The king never left. He was just letting the rest of the room exhaust itself before he took his seat again. And now the seat is warm, the crown is polished, and the throne is waiting. If you made it all the way to this point in the video, welcome. Genuinely. I have missed being able to talk to you like this. The last few months have been intense, the news cycle has been relentless, and there have been moments where it felt like the whole conversation was drowning in noise. But right now, right here, we are in the eye of the storm together, and I could not think of a better group of people to ride out the next few weeks with than the ones who are still here at minute 13. So thank you. Truly. This work does not exist without you. Before you go, I want to leave you with one more thought, because I think it is going to matter more and more as we get closer to the album. The most powerful move an artist can make is silence. And Kendrick Lamar has weaponized silence in a way that no rapper has ever weaponized it before. He has made not speaking into a form of speech so loud it drowns out every other voice in the room. That is a level of artistry that transcends the genre. That is the kind of move that puts him in the same conversation as the great artistic tacticians of any medium, the Kubricks, the Scorseses, the Baldwins, the Coltranes. He is not just the best rapper alive. He is one of the best artistic strategists of our time, and this album is going to make that impossible to deny. So drop your read in the comments. Tell me what you are expecting from How to Pray. Tell me if you think the Creed theory holds up. Tell me who you think is the most exposed by the coronation that is about to happen. And if you disagree with any of this, if you are one of the holdouts who thinks Kendrick Lamar is bluffing, drop your take too. I want to see it. I want to see all of it. Because in 3 weeks, we are going to look back at this comment section and see who read the moment correctly and who missed it, and that record is going to be permanent. So make sure your name is on the right side of it. And listen, if you cannot wait to see how this next chapter unfolds, and honestly, why would you be able to wait? Because the ride from here to August 28th is going to be one of the wildest stretches in modern hip-hop. Check out the video on your end screen right now. I put together a full breakdown of what I think the final track list is going to look like, and there are a few names on there that are going to shock you. Trust me, you do not want to miss it. Hit like, hit subscribe, hype the video up if you can, and I will see you in the next one. Kendrick Lamar is coming. The room is watching, and nobody in that room is ready. And before I let you go, let me leave you with one final image, because I think it captures everything we have talked about tonight in a way that no paragraph of analysis can. Picture Kendrick Lamar right now. Not on a stage. Not in a booth. Not at a red carpet event. Picture him sitting in a quiet room somewhere in Los Angeles, headphones on, listening back to a mix of a record that has not been heard by more than 10 people on planet Earth. Picture the calm on his face. Picture the fact that he has spent the last 12 months building a piece of art so complete, so intentional, so deeply personal, that when it finally reaches the world, it is going to make every single argument about who runs this genre look absurd in retrospect. Picture the fact that while he is doing that, an entire industry of pundits, podcasters, rival rappers, and paid mouthpieces is out there right now, at this exact second, spending their energy trying to convince you that this man is anything less than the most important rapper alive. Picture how out of touch that campaign is going to look in 6 weeks. Picture how ridiculous the receipts are going to make it appear. That is the image I want you to carry into the rest of your day. Because once Kendrick Lamar breaks the silence, there is no undoing what happens next. There is no rewinding the tape. There is no pretending you did not see the coronation. Every single person in the culture is going to have to reckon with the reality that the biggest artist in hip-hop spent an entire calendar year controlling the conversation without releasing a single song, and then, when he finally did release the song, it hit harder than every one of his rivals combined. That is not a run. That is a rewriting of the record books. That is Kendrick Lamar climbing into a category of his own and slamming the door behind him. And one last thing before I really wrap it up, because it is important. This is your moment too. If you are watching this video right now, if you are one of the people who has been paying attention to Kendrick Lamar's arc for years, if you have been in the trenches defending his greatness while the rest of the internet has been laughing, this coronation belongs to you as much as it belongs to him. Because artists at this level do not exist in a vacuum. They exist because of audiences who recognize genius in real time and refuse to let the world dismiss it. That is you. That has always been you. And when the album drops at the end of this month, take a moment to appreciate that you called it before the rest of the world did. That is a rare and beautiful thing in this culture. Do not let anybody take it from you. And here is one more thread I want to pull on before we truly close this out, because it has been on my mind for weeks, and I have not seen anybody in the culture connect these dots in the way they deserve to be connected. Kendrick Lamar is operating on a timeline that most rap fans cannot even see. When he dropped the pop-out concert in Los Angeles, that was not a victory lap. That was a foundation. When he took the Super Bowl halftime stage and reshaped what a hip-hop performance could look like on the biggest television platform on the planet, that was not a coronation. That was a warning. Every single one of those events was a setup for what is arriving at the end of this month. Kendrick Lamar has been laying track for the biggest artistic release of his career, and the vast majority of people in the hip-hop conversation are still processing yesterday, while he is already 3 moves ahead into next year. Think about the structural genius of that for a second. Most rappers release an album, then spend a year promoting it, then take a year off, then release another album. That is the standard cycle. Kendrick Lamar has torn that cycle to pieces. He is releasing culture, not albums. He is releasing gravitational moments that pull the entire genre into his orbit, and each one of those moments builds on the one before it. GNX did not just sell records. GNX set the emotional temperature for the year that followed. The pop-out concert did not just fill a stadium. The pop-out concert put every West Coast legend in a single room and reminded the world that Kendrick Lamar is not just a solo artist. He is the connective tissue of an entire regional history. The Super Bowl did not just deliver a performance. The Super Bowl proved that Kendrick Lamar can command the biggest audience in American entertainment and still make the show feel like his own private art installation. Every one of these beats is deliberate. Every one of them is compounding. And the album arriving at the end of this month is the payoff for all of it. And if you want to understand just how untouchable Kendrick Lamar has become inside this ecosystem, watch what happens whenever a rival tries to challenge him. The challenger drops a record. For 72 hours, the internet debates it. Somebody, inevitably, brings up Kendrick Lamar. The debate pivots to Kendrick Lamar. Within a week, the original release is forgotten, and the timeline is back to talking about a man who has not put out any new music. That has happened at least 6 times in the last 12 months. 6. Every attempt to shift the cultural center of gravity has failed, and each failure has made the gravity stronger. That is not a coincidence. That is what happens when an artist becomes bigger than the medium they operate in. And this is where I need to be really direct with you, because the next 4 weeks are going to be chaotic, and I want you to have a lens to interpret them through. When the album drops, there is going to be a coordinated response from every corner of the industry that has a stake in Kendrick Lamar's failure. You are going to see mid-tier podcasters take strange angles to try to diminish it. You are going to see certain journalists write pieces that seem calibrated to protect Drake's brand. You are going to see rival fandoms flood the timeline with talking points that all sound suspiciously similar. Do not be surprised by any of this. It is going to happen. It has to happen. Because when an artist is this dominant, the pushback becomes proportional to the dominance, and the only tool the losing side has left is the ability to muddy the water. So watch the water carefully. When you see the mud, remember what caused it. Remember who benefits from you doubting the greatest rapper of your generation. Remember who is paying for the noise.